see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I'm here today with Noble Kelly. And I met Noble through the Ashoka website. Ashoka is doing a competition on how to use empathy within the education system. And Noble and I are both kind of expert commentators. So thank you, Noble, for joining me here today. Would you like to say a little bit something about yourself and your organization?
Sure. First of all, Education Beyond Borders is a Canadian, a national organization of teachers that go to developing regions to work with teachers in a peer designed and led professional development model that seeks to empower local teachers to be leaders in their communities and look at moving what we see as a teacher-centered learning model, kind of a rote teaching style, towards a student-centered, more engaged learning environment. So we look at sharing professional development best practices around methodologies and pedagogy that looks at cooperative learning strategies, inquiry-based approach, project-based learning, differentiated instruction as the core to our model. And we also teach teachers to have facilitation skills. So by the end of about a 4 or 5 year program, the local teachers are running this model for themselves and have customized it to fit their local context. And we're only there as support as needed. They've developed a professional learning cluster infrastructure within their districts to help share this information with their peers and colleagues in outreach and often isolated regions in their countries. How this all got started, I'm an educator from British Columbia, Canada, and I've been teaching since 1991, and my teaching subject areas are around ICTs, computers, and entrepreneurship, business, a lot of project-based electives. And I also am part of the BC Teachers Federation Social Justice Group. So the Social Justice Group looks at integrating and infusing social justice issues across the curricula in the BC education system. And they have various action groups from gender issues, anti-racism, environmental sustainability, LGBTQ, peace and global education, and so on. And we develop lesson plans, resources, and workshops to support teachers in the infusion of social justice issues across curricula. We use what's called a social justice lens that kind of looks at the various levels of from social service to social responsibility, and culminated in what we believe is social justice. And when I started Education Beyond Borders it all started with a trip to South Africa in 2005, working with some street kids and hence their teachers, and realizing that, for example, they had a lot of computers not a lot, a handful of computers sitting there in a poor state of repair and just collecting dust because these were donated computers. They didn't come with any support, any training, any follow-up, and so the teacher there did not know what to do with them. And so as a visiting teacher with an ICT background, I got the teachers in, helped them clean up the computers and learn through that process, and also took them through an internet search workshop.
If I could just interrupt a little bit. One thing I'm kind of looking at, trying to frame this around empathy, and how do we build a culture of empathy within the education system? So it sounds like you're involved in the education system, training teachers, creating curriculum. Right. You've been doing technical work, and you're kind of geared a little bit more towards social justice. It sounds like, and I was wondering if we looked at it from the lens of empathy within education, like what are the ways that we can build from your experience, what are the ways that we can go about building a culture of empathy within the education system?
Right. Um, my biggest piece that I feel strongly about, I mean, through the work that we do, once we've developed the local teachers in developing countries, we understand their perspective and understand that there's a lot of um, things that, because of a lack of access to information and colleagues globally, a lot of the best practices are often do not reach them. But once they become trained leaders in facilitation in their communities, we are seeing that there are a lot of issues around, like, for example, gender issues, environmental sustainability, peace and character education, which includes conflict resolution, environmental, and so on. So what we're seeing is a need by many of our colleagues in these regions to become more globally aware and look to be more proactive in developing leaders of tomorrow. One of the things that I'm often seeing through this process and through this work is that the countries of the North are creating much of a myopic view of our planet because of the connectivity issues. We seem to be connecting and communicating with people within the same cultures, same socioeconomic status, same privileged connectivity. And so for me, empathy is about creating relationships, diverse relationships. And that is something that I don't see quite happening in the education system, especially in our countries. And so when we come from a society of the haves, you often, for teachers, it's about facilitation and the path of least resistance, oftentimes. And so, how do you truly teach about empathy without building relationships?
So you're saying we need to have relationships between the teachers from different parts of the world, kind of be networking perhaps through ways like we're doing now, through Skype or other ways?
Exactly. I mean, yes, there's going to be difficulties in doing that. However, the importance and the rationale needs to can't be overemphasized. We need to see more of a global perspective happening. We need to be connecting our classrooms with classrooms. The technology exists. I mean, in many of these countries I work with in Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Namibia, South Africa, Ethiopia, they have a strong cell phone system. And they do have those modem sticks that they can connect to a laptop. So they are connecting via Skype. They're communicating through mobile technologies. And so there is the ability, though limited, to connect through a Skype video, your classroom with another classroom somewhere else in the world, and have discussions so that we develop relationships and we better understand each other. That's part of the benefits of my program as well, because what I'm seeing in our system happening a lot is that we do become teachers that become overworked, and we often forget why we became teachers in the first place, because the system is very politicized. And so for me, part of this was a wellness piece to kind of get back to why I became a teacher, and I gained so much from this global experience that many, having more teachers be able to do that, they then come back and be able to infuse their classrooms and their school communities with this global perspective.
So are you saying what we need, to build a culture of empathy within education, just to summarize some of the points you're making here, rephrase it, is that we need to network all the teachers around the world together, get them kind of dialoguing with each other, and that dialogue itself kind of energizes the teachers. That connection is something that they need, that connection and support. And the other thing I heard as well is kind of sharing of best practices too. So those are kind of three kind of aspects so far of building a culture of empathy?
Right. I think for the majority of teachers, we're starting to see that quality education is an important piece. And what does quality mean? Many teachers I've talked to are starting to look at, we need to be changing the assessment practices of the education system and what is really truly being assessed. There's one thing to know facts and figures, but the other pieces about this, the social interactions and the ability to work collaboratively and work in teams and so on. So these various other issues, especially with the great opportunity and power of social media. I mean, we've already seen what can happen with social media when it comes to getting a group of people together to affect change. But without things like strong foundations in conflict resolution and empathy and various other social justice pieces, without that strong foundation or that game plan, often you get chaos or riots and without much forth to the consequences or what next, So there needs to be that built in to honestly create global leaders in the youth of today.
So you've just brought up social justice several times. So it sounds like that's really an important value to you. And I'm just wondering, what is the relationship between justice, social justice, and empathy for you? How do they connect?
For me, I mean, it's all about, it's one thing to have a philosophy, but it's the next thing to have, what are you going to do with that? And for me, we have to get away about this this feeling of tolerance or charity. These are very low on a spectrum of emotions, or sorry. For example, you can have tolerance and then compassion, but then empathy is the next level up. And for that to happen, you need to be building relationships. For me, on the social justice spectrum, social service, which is around charity, is probably at the lower end and often the gateway to social justice. And then social responsibility is adding an education piece to it, the understanding of it. But social justice is the advocacy piece, is the action piece. And moving to change or be proactive to change and affect positive change. And so, that's the piece with for me, for empathy as well. It's, when we often, as teachers, we often have assemblies around, for example, drinking and driving or other social issues. And people can be sympathetic and sad, and the kids are sad for a couple of days, but it goes in one ear and out the other, and they're back to their daily routine, and there's very little retention or positive behavioral change. And so, change in thinking. So what is missing? And the piece that I've seen over the years that I strongly believe is missing is that relationship piece. They did not personally know that person. And to truly be empathetic of another, you've got to, when you say walk in their shoes, it's hard to visualize walking in somebody's shoes if you haven't actually met them. And really understand their circumstances, and then what to do with it afterwards. Once you understand it, what's the next piece? And that's where for sustainability and really positive change in this area, it needs to start from strong leadership. I mean, in the classroom, that's the teacher, but we need to be facilitators. But it also needs to be peer leadership. So, student leaders as well that are able to do this.
I just have a little bit of bronchitis, so excuse me for that.
Oh, no worries.
I'll delete that from the video. So I can, on that track, I can eliminate my cough. So excuse me. So it sounds like the social the social justice part for you is really where the action takes place, and it sounds like that's really what is of value to you. It's like not just sitting around hearing about people's stories, but really getting out there and doing something, taking responsibility. And it sounds like the first part of that, for it to be sustainable, is for it to be to have those connections with people. So if you really have those one-to-one personal connections, that creates the energy. I mean, it's that empathy that comes out of that. Those connections creates the energy for taking that action to kind of alleviate. I mean, just for problem solving, I guess. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And it needs to be a vision. It's one thing to have an individual, a personal vision of being empathetic or wanting to affect positive change, but institutionally, we need to have a school culture that supports global perspectives and empathy. And so, teachers and administrators and so on coming together to develop a culture and vision for that school where that is the norm. That is fused throughout the curriculum. We are, wherever possible, we are choosing examples of global issues or areas where we can have an empathetic approach to the understanding of those issues and still learn the academic facts and figures that are part of that. And so, how the technology also exists where we can say, okay, this month our class is going to connect with this classroom in Burkina Faso or in Colombia or in the Philippines, and get really understand the interconnectedness of world events and and things. So, for example, I'm trying to connect teachers. Part of this process is as teachers build these relationships and friendships, they're more connected, and they often connect throughout the year. So in Kenya and in East Africa, and talk about the drought and the food crisis and the issues there, we can help best understand when we connect our classrooms and talk to the kids, peers to peers and teacher to teacher, talk about what are the economic, political, social implications of and environmental of the drought, and so on. So, we then become, we can have critical discussions, peer-led critical discussions around that, where the teacher's the facilitator of these processes. So it's up to us to provide these opportunities, because they exist, to kind of expand and enrich the curriculum, to afford us to develop more of these relationships.
So it sounds like the leadership of teachers being real social leaders was like an important part. But the other part was that if you see some kind of a problem out in society, and it's like everybody says, oh, okay, in our school we're going to do a little fundraiser, and then that's kind of the end of it, right? It's like, it's that you're saying that we need to actually change the culture of the school. And that's kind of what I'm working on in terms, and I kind of call it the phrase of building a culture of empathy, so that within the school itself, that empathy is a very conscious, ongoing part of the structure and values of the school, and it's ongoing. It's like, how do we just keep refining? How do we keep deepening the empathic connection?
Right. And it needs to be something that involves all stakeholders to have sustained buy-in. I mean, that includes the parents, that includes the ministry, that includes the administration, the district level of personnel, the teachers, the support staff, the students, and often this may be an easier thing to understand at an elementary or primary level, but if this is not also reinforced at the secondary level, then it's soon forgotten about. So there definitely needs to be continuity from level to level, and continuous reinforcement of the same, so that this is not something that's in a few schools in the district. It's something that's district wide, so that as as students develop and get older, it's constantly reinforced throughout their school lives, but also at home. You know, it's one thing. It's just it can't be just at school, but it has to. How do we get the parents and the home to have that positive reinforcement and understand the reasons behind this as well?
So we have to create programs where we build a culture of empathy within the home. We have to get everyone, all the stakeholders involved around this vision for greater empathy, and that within the schools, it needs to be not just in one class, you know, like second grade or something, you take a little class on empathy, but that it's in, you know, kindergarten, first, second, third, and it kind of builds throughout the whole curriculum. It sounds like you're saying.
Right, and it's not, you know, and if you look at it from the outside, you say, oh well, that's a lot of work. That's going to be really hard to do, and it's you know, and it really isn't. I mean, as departments, as curriculum developers, or things, it's just about changing the context a little bit of various things. You know, wherever the opportunities, or what we like to call the teachable moments, come in, needs to be addressed, and to be addressed in such a way that we are looking at a diverse perspective and trying to be more empathetic, but also providing opportunities here and there to actually connect with firsthand witnesses and developing that relationship when possible, and then allowing the opportunity exists for that continuation of those relationships outside of the school, so that, you know, these what we look at peer-to-peer learning, moving towards peer-to-peer learning and collaboration. And so looking at that, because you know, through our organization and as an educator, truly believe that, you know, you will find the solutions through collaboration. You know, it's not something we can do by ourselves, and only working together can we understand and also better affect positive change and find the solutions.
Well, I've been doing a lot of interviews around this term, just how do we build a culture of empathy? And something that keeps coming up as one of the steps is to dialogue about it. Just keep talking about it, keep bringing it up, and just bring more people into the dialogue. So that seems to be kind of one approach. Just wondering how that resonates with what you're saying.
Right. You know, for me, and it seems to be the thing in education, is there is a lot of dialogue, but then where's the action piece? There's a saying I have when I work with my colleagues in here and in other countries. We like to, you know, admire the problem. You know, it's very easy to have the dialogue and keep talking, and we know what the issues are. We know what the challenges are in education. We keep hearing it over and over again, but very little time is spent working together to come up with solutions and actually an action plan to move forward on those ideas. And so, you know, so part of what the work we do is to develop the process of creating a holistic stakeholder approach to developing an action plan, brainstorming ideas, creating realistic goals, and then developing an action plan to move towards that. And that's something that, you know, there's very little education or training on, is these kind of collaborative processes and how to actually move from passion to action, right? And we actually had a conference on that in BC, and I kind of did an article on that as well. It's just that, you know, how do you take your passion and actually turn it into action? And it's that you know, you may be that risk taker, that person, a leader, but it's that next person that joins you that's the important piece, because that starts building the momentum for a movement. And so, you know, it's important to have, you know, support, and it's important that, you know, if it's just a handful of you in your school or 3, that you then get someone from the leadership and then start small and take those steps. Everything we've known about moving forward on anything is taking the small steps first to kind of get there. So I think that piece, that discussion, yes, open up the dialogue, including more people is definitely an important piece. But then, how do you transition from dialogue to action?
Well, this kind of comes into kind of, for me, the question of what is empathy, kind of the definition of empathy. And for me, I've seen it as four parts. And the first part is self-empathy. So that's like being the mindfulness, self-awareness, sensory awareness of what's going on in your own body. The second part is the mirrored empathy, or sometimes called emotional or affective empathy, which is based on mirror neurons. So as I'm seeing you now, I see you kind of nodding your head, and and smiling, a slight little smile there, that I can feel what's going on in you through that mirror neuron effect. And then there's the what's called, I call it imaginative empathy, or it's also called perspective taking or cognitive empathy, which is that you can put yourself into the position of another, just as an actor would do. And then the fourth part is empathic action. And I've heard empathic action is that when you have that connection of really connecting with others, that you want to take action. And it's when that someone had defined it once, saying that empathy is when the blocks to action are removed. So you know that sense where you're working with someone and things aren't working right, you're kind of in conflict. It means that somehow you haven't connected at those other levels yet to kind of take that step of action. So that's kind of the operating definition that I use for empathy. I'm just wondering how that resonates with your understanding of empathy.
Yeah, I agree. To the point. I think many just how do you teach that to youth, and how do you live that as an adult? Often the basic definition is walking in somebody else's shoes, and how do you do that when you haven't even met them? Like you said, that imaginative empathy, where I think for the most part people can probably, they think they understand, or they think they know what it might be like because they've seen enough media, but that's the media perspective, right? They've seen enough media on that they say, okay, that builds and develops that image. But from real world experiences, for me, it's like that image is different. That image of Ethiopia is way different than what the media, because those strong images back from the late 70s, early 80s, they're still there. Those images are still prominent, but Ethiopia is not that Ethiopia anymore. So it's like people are connected. They're culturally connected, but they're also connected, through mobile technologies. So people would be surprised, and so there's that little bit of arrogance, I think, on our part, and that comes from always doing what we always did, and always connecting with who we always connect with, and that creating that myopic worldview. We say we're global, but we're only connecting with the haves. So how global are we? And so that's the challenge. So that moving piece, that moving beyond, definitely takes that whether it's virtual or in person, that making that connection or starting to build that relationship. And in all, that's the only thing that I've seen as an educator that really has made a huge difference in really truly understanding somebody else's perspective, and even going so far as to want to advocate for that other person. But it's that piece where you have to understand that because of that, it's a mutual benefit. Because almost that Ubuntu thing, because you are, I am. sort of thing. So because I help you, I'm helping myself. Because we are working together for something good, we help each other, we help all. So it's that it has to be that understanding of that's what comes from that development of that relationship.
Yeah, the relationship leads us to see our common humanity, and out of that common humanity, we can kind of take the steps, or kind of want to take the steps, because we're doing it for both of us, for both of our beings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We have to get away from that arrogance that, you know, we're here to help somebody else, and because we can. Oh yeah, I'm going to help you, or I need to help you because I have more than you, or my life's better, or, you know, that's sad. You know, it's about, you know, we are better because of it too. We have to understand that you know, we can learn from others. We can learn from those that have different things than us, or live differently than us. We need to analyze it and evaluate our own perspectives. And only through having those opportunities to be exposed to other perspectives can we truly go on that path.
Well, you mentioned empathy and the definition of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes, and that's kind of a metaphor that's commonly used to describe empathy. I was wondering, from your own imagination, if you came up with a metaphor of what empathy is like, what would empathy be like if it's a type of person, or a type of land, or a type of animal, or a machine, or just anything? I have my own, which I could share. Maybe it would stimulate some, but
I mean, for me, I would like to hear yours in a second, but I think for me, empathy is walking hand in hand. I think the joining of hands is, you know, it's the one thing that because it's that physical, it's all, you know, that even though it doesn't necessarily have to be that physical connection, but it's that something has to join and go in the same direction, kind of thing. It's joining hands and walking in the same direction, kind of thing. And I think that's where, you know, it shows that, you know, we're in this together and we both benefit from this. So, you know, it's that creating that connection. And you don't normally hold hands with someone you haven't built a relationship with, and things like that. So, you know, that's the piece, I think. So for me, I guess, you know, that vision of taking someone's hand and you know, walking together, for me, would probably be
your metaphor of empathy, kind of. Yeah. It reminds me of someone I had asked that they had the metaphor of actually Dante's Inferno. You know how Dante goes with Gabriel into the different levels of hell, and there's that Gabriel has his shoulder over Dante's shoulder as they walk through hell, and he said it's very much like that. It's like having that person, you know, with their arm over your shoulder as you go into this, and that's what kind of your metaphor reminded me a little bit of that. It seems very similar to that metaphor. My metaphor is empathy is like a cornucopia, and that each of us is like a cornucopia of feelings, of experiences, and that then we share our cornucopias of experience, and then we're basically richer, you know, for it, because we get to have not only our own experience, but the experience of others. So in a cornucopia is a horn of plenty, where all these fruits and vegetables and, you know, all these wonderful things kind of pour out of.
Or, I mean, that, for me, that kind of reminds me of another one that just popped in my head, would be like a potluck supper. Everyone brings something, and you know, and it's synergetic. So the sum of the parts, you know, is greater. You know, you get the overall thing together becomes, you know, a benefit for all, right? So, you know, but everyone has something to contribute to that overall feast, right? And so, like, a potluck supper is great, you know, and the imagery for me of that holding the hand is about equality, about being peers, I prefer to have that, it's not, though I understand the one of the arm over the shoulder kind of thing, but that almost seems more of a dominant passive kind of role too, somewhat, that I'm caring for someone. It has to be more of an equitable footing where it's peer to peer and we both are equals in this journey. So that whole piece about like the potluck supper too is like everyone has something to contribute, and recognizing that as well.
Yeah, I really like that one. Empathy is a potluck supper. That's great. So, okay, let's see. The other part was having a vision. When I asked people about building a culture of empathy, it seems that one part of it is having that vision to even do it, and to have that vision to work towards it. And that's one thing I'm kind of excited about with Ashoka, is they have a large network, and it seems that they're really committed. Ashoka is really committed to that vision. So it seems, I don't know, what do you think about the whole Ashoka initiative towards empathy?
Yeah. I applauded the initiative. I think the fact that it's a global and not just a national piece is important. My only suggestion was, I don't like the fact that it's a competition. Something like this needs to be intrinsically motivated, right? And as a catalyst, competitions work for that purpose. That's great, but maybe avoiding the word competition. I think there's too much competition, especially in education, for when you rank schools and results and things like that. When you have competition, that's almost a barrier to collaboration. You're not working together because you want to get ahead from your peer. And so, for me, my suggestion would to emphasize and promote more joint proposals from different countries, because then you're truly taking action to build those relationships through this forum. And so to see, when I look at things and start looking at some of these, and I hate the term expert, because how are we experts? We're maybe experienced, but they're different, like you say, different experiences. So we come from different perspectives and have suggestions and insights. But I kind of don't like to be the term expert. But what I will be looking for is those, and looking at are those proposals that are taking action, sustainable action that builds relationships. So as an organization, I think it's important that we look at how can, through this forum or this process, can we empower and promote joint proposals from different countries, and not just from the haves to the haves, but the haves to the have-nots, and between the have-nots, and looking at how they can work together to create something sustainable and systematic.
Yeah, so the competitive part can actually diminish empathy in some ways. It's not. It does seem to generate a lot of action in that sense. There's been like 100 proposals, and I was really wondering. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was really wondering about that myself. I was kind of questioning the competitive aspect of it, and really wondering, what is the energetic dynamic to get people involved, because the competition, I see that it really is getting people involved, and it's like, how do we get that? How do we create another energy cycle that gets people involved and want to maybe just share best practices or something like that in a non-competitive and collaborative way?
Exactly. Yeah. As part of, what I do with Education Beyond Borders is, as we go from country to country and through my online global education network, I find teachers who can act as liaisons, who want to connect teachers with other teachers and classrooms with other classrooms. And I try to avoid the kind of sister school kind of approach where, someone from our school, from Canada, is supporting financially another school in another country. Those things may develop, but that shouldn't be the premise for the connection. It should be for the building of relationships and critical discussions around, current and global issues that are curricularly framed. So those are the opportunities that I want to develop, and they need to be simple. Too many people try to take on too much, and those kind of connections aren't sustainable, especially when you're dealing with a low capacity partner. So it's important that if it's a simple thing that they a Skype to Skype connection for half an hour, where they get to know each other and talk and find out more about each other, you're building a relationship. You start in a relationship, and then afterwards, they can connect how they can connect best, if it's through SMS or email or snail mail or whatever, and continue that connection. But that important piece of seeing face to face and making a connection is important. But that's the piece that needs to be, how do you actually able to get that activity and make it intrinsic, and how do you make it a sharing of best practices? I think that's the piece that that needs more attention. And again, if it starts small, then great. You can build from that and expand that network. And see the benefits, and because those interactions, those teachers, it was a change of culture for them, because teachers in these countries are fighting. They're in survival mode for their resources and things. So there's very little collaborative activity from teacher to teacher, even within the same school, or even between the primary and secondary school, which is next door to each other, because there's that top-down demand for results and competition, that certain schools will get certain things if they have certain results, and so that never fosters collaboration. And so through this process, we break those barriers and borders, and look at how do we work together as colleagues to solve that problem. And through that process, they see the long-term sustainable benefit to them as a whole, to them as a collective, and to education, and to ultimately the children in their charge. Right, you're improving the quality of education in their lives, and so that is the rationale that they develop themselves and build up, and then is able to sustain intrinsically.
Yeah, one of the problems with the competition is we start walling ourselves off from the other, and it's not because we're trying to get a leg up or whatever. So the approach that I'm doing now is to create a conference on how we can build a culture of empathy. So to start lining up, first I'm doing dialogues like we're doing right now, but then just inviting yourself and others to put together panels. Let's get 5 or 6 people on a discussion panel and have a dialogue like this, to just start getting to know each other, to start just brainstorming and see what kind of next steps we have. So I would invite you to take part
Sure.
in one of those, and invite your colleagues and friends, and see what we can do next. So okay, we've been going for about 45 minutes, and this is a really wonderful dialogue. I'm really enjoying it. Just all the insights that you have and all the experience, it really comes through. And is there any kind of topics or areas that you feel to explore still, that you'd really like to talk about?
I think, no, I think we pretty much covered. I think, definitely, whether we like it or not, educators are role models, and unless we are living what we want to see in our students, then change won't happen. And I think, that piece for us is, as educators, we become very isolated in our own thinking. We mask it under autonomy, but it's because of the workload, because of everything else, we feel that it's hard to work with others. It's hard to collaborate. It's hard to make those connections, and that's because the perspective is, it's an extra thing, and to simplify this and to help facilitate it turning into action, we have to see that it's not an add-on, that it's something that is instead of, or combined with. That it could be just about how we do things. You don't need to change what you're doing, but maybe just how you do it. And so when we start changing our attitudes around that and start looking at the collective benefit of doing these kind of connections and talking about critically analyzing and dialoguing to become empathetic, then and analyzing and evaluating our own perspectives, I think that's where that almost critical mass thing will happen, where it takes it over that plateau and becomes more of a movement.
Yeah, that was the other part that I was starting to hear in what you were saying, is that the teachers might feel isolated. And it's that the teachers need empathy too. There's this idea that, hey, teachers need to be giving empathy to all these students, and the teachers are getting stressed. They're not feeling heard, and the teachers need support. So it's like this whole chain of support. And the less support people have, it kind of passes, the negativity passes along. So somehow we have to create a chain of support and empathy for everyone, kind of a circular support. And teachers especially, that they need to be being heard about the problems that they're having and getting
Correct.
empathy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
empathy breeds empathy.
Empathy breeds empathy. That's a great closing for our for our dialogue. So okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thank you very much, Noble, for your time and sharing your insights. And I'm looking forward to doing some panels together to keep this dialogue going.
Thank you for your initiative, and it's quite easy in our own lives to keep busy, but it's about the networking. It's about working together to if only one person is doing this, then it becomes a lot of work. But together sharing the task makes it a lot easier, right? So yeah, I'm in. Please keep me in the loop, and wherever I can be part of a panel or stuff. I know BC. Where are you located?
I'm in California, Bay Area.
Okay. I know. Us in British Columbia, there is quite a big movement around empathy, and looking at there's been some conferences and some stuff going on. So I'll keep my finger on that pulse and keep you in the loop there, and seeing how we can kind of create this network. There's a number of conferences coming up there that bring in educators from around the world in BC, so these are opportunities for this as well.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.